Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So, Derek, I got a fun and exciting episode to you guys this evening because we're going to be going over PPSSPP as the PlayStation Portable Emulator just got a very big update as of yesterday, moving over to version 1.19, bringing in a ton of fixes, some new features, as well as reworked emulation, going from high-level emulation to low-level emulation in some aspects, improving music and fixing a bunch of graphical glitches. This is definitely an awesome update, one of the biggest ones I feel like PPSSPP has had in a long time. That's what we're going to be talking about today. And in general, this has been a big week for retro gaming emulation because just yesterday we talked about the Dolphin emulator for GameCube and Wii emulation and just how much of an improvement that had gotten as well. So it's really interesting that both Dolphin as well as PPSSPP got big updates this week. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But the PlayStation Portable has some amazing games, and PlayStation Portable emulation has come a long way. And you'll see here as of yesterday, the 5th of June, we got PPSSPP 1.19 with a ton of different improvements. I'm going to go over all of those with you and kind of explain what they are. But if you want to just see all of these documentations, I will leave a link in the description below to the news update where you can kind of get more granular and even go over to GitHub to see all of the different changes. I'll show you one of the most important ones, but if you want to dig deep, the link will be in the description. But it's so nice to get all of these improvements, and there's a ton of rendering fixes and performance fixes as well, calling out specific games. This is going to be the last version that supports something like Direct3D 9. It's going to go over to DirectX 11 from this point on. That makes sense because that is getting a little bit long in the tooth. But games like MotorStorm are mentioned in the overall improvement category, and there was a lot of work done on the rendering, including lens flare, and any game where you can just be stupid and decide to take a salt truck out into a rally race on snow, you know 100% I'm going to have to do that. This is an absolutely awesome arcade racing game on the PlayStation Portable, and it's definitely going to be much improved in this version of PPSSPP. But I am curious, leave me a comment down below and tell me what your favorite PlayStation Portable game is. There's so many to choose from, so I would be curious to hear what you guys love the most. But the nice thing is, if you're not on a PlayStation Portable with a nice screen, something like PSP Emulation gives you the ability to bump the internal rendering resolution to kind of get an image out of PlayStation Portable games that you never got before, because being able to dial up the internal rendering resolution to 1080p or even 4K makes these games feel almost fresh and new in some ways. Now on the improvement front, there are some notes here as well. Some of the older Macs are going to be excluded from using Vulkan, and I know there's a couple Mac users out there, so you might want to go over that. It's kind of just deprecating a few of the older platforms, but you're going to see here, as far as the rendering and performance fixes, a lot of very popular games this month are going to get improvements. MotorStorm, Outrun, Jak and Daxter, Persona 1 and 2, and some other games as well. And that is always fun because these games would run, but they would definitely have some graphical glitches or issues in some of their emulation, because reality is PPSSPP is still an inactive development emulator, so not every single game is going to work 100% perfectly, but when the team brings out an update this big and even hypes up how big it is, you know you're in for a real treat as far as PlayStation Portable emulation is concerned. And I love that emulators like this exist because they basically near run every single game out there, and there's so many of them that just feel absolutely flawless. And Jak and Daxter here, a totally fun action platform that if you've never checked out before, you definitely should. And it's one of those things, if you don't have a PlayStation Portable, if you didn't play one back in the day, just download PPSSPP and give it a shot. This thing looks absolutely incredible on any panel you put it on. Honestly, on my 4K OLED in my living room, running this via software emulation just looks incredible because most games, if you have a beefy enough PC, can be dialed all the way up to 4K to be able to get all of that resolution you want out of the system. And that really is, again, a great thing. It just makes these games feel a little bit fresher and a little bit newer. But the devs are going through rewriting entire chunks of PPSSPP to make sure that you get the best performance out of it. So if you've ever noticed any glitches in Jak and Daxter as far as the graphics are concerned, they should be completely ironed out as far as this release is concerned. But it's not just graphics on this one as well. They've also went through and rewrote a lot of the audio engine as to how music actually streams in and plays. So that's going to be our first soundtrack sample. It gets pretty deep on the audio side of things, but they re-engineered that music player. So go ahead and listen for 45 seconds. I'll be right back to show you a lot more improvements.
Hey, Jack, what do you suppose that is? It looks like eco, but it's all hard and pointy. Jackie boy, I do believe we just hit pay dirt. Let's mosey on back to the Hellcat.
I mean, you would probably never know that PPSSPP was using a little bit of trickery as to how to actually stream in that music, but now there's a completely new music system and it's going to sound even better than it did before. Now, on the performance fixes, one of the games mentioned, and one of my favorite games of all time, is Outrun 2. And if for some strange reason you've never played this game before, I implore you to check it out any way you can. On original PSP hardware, it looks incredible on the screen, but in PPSSPP, dialing the resolution up on this thing is just absolutely outstanding, and in some ways it gets very close to the performance of the arcade versions of the game. And because it's fully featured and has all of the courses from SP-SDX on the Sega Lindbergh, it is an incredible version of the game to play. And the nice thing is, in the newest version of PPSSPP, you're going to be getting a lot of visual improvements to lens flares and other lighting effects, and I will go over the GitHub issue on that and kind of show you what changed in the code and exactly how it is done, because at least for me personally, understanding how these fixes came in is half the fun of doing these videos, kind of granularly diving into the GitHub code and going over the developers' examples of what they did, why they did it, and what it improves in the game. But again, Outrun 2, just a 10 out of 10, best arcade racing game ever made in my opinion, but you can feel free to disagree down below, but I don't think I'll get anyone to disagree with that. And just so you know, some of the modules have also switched over to LLE, or low level emulation. There's two ways to do this: HLE, which is high level emulation, and LLE, which obviously stands for low. So some of the emulators actually been reconfigured and recoded to be able to work. Now, I screwed up completely here. There's a freezing issue on the third version of this game, but I accidentally captured the original SOCOM, so you just have to kind of play around with me here. I kind of forget there's so many different SOCOMs on the system, but SOCOM 3 was something that would freeze on the emulator, and now that's been completely fixed up as well. That may be because of that low-level emulation, but it's nice that we're going to be getting more games running more stably within PPSSPP. Maybe next time I'll read the notes a little bit closer and realize that it was 3, not the original, that they were actually talking about. But hey, we all make mistakes now and again. I figured I'd just admit mine. And there's a whole host of these things, and again, every time you see that hashtag followed by a number, you can go over to the GitHub and actually look at the commit and see what that code changed and how it fixed it. They even mentioned stuff like Persona 1 and 2 on the PlayStation Portable, and these are incredible versions of Persona. If you like this series and you've never played it before, I can't recommend these enough. Just be aware it's going to take you a very long time to get through them, but it's one of those things, just kind of do it for an hour or two every day and you will get to the end of them and you will have a ton of fun. And this is something, I have these games in my original PSP collection, and I will throw them in my handheld every once in a while if I feel like revisiting, but you're going to get improvements on visuals and transitions in this game as well, and that is so much fun. It really shows a commitment from the developers to make sure that every single glitch in the PlayStation Portable emulation is buttoned up and taken care of. And again, I just love the commitment to accuracy on these. I would honestly say though, my favorite improvement of the month is probably that audio handling, because there's so many games on PlayStation Portable that have so much incredible music in them, you just want to hear it, which is obviously my natural segue into the second music sample of this video. And you know full well there's one game that I think the music is absolutely perfect for. You can probably guess before it actually comes up, but here's your second soundtrack sample. Listen, and I'll be right back with just a little bit more to show. Outrun 2 just has some of the best music of any game ever made, and it sounds spectacular coming out of PPSSPP. And on the visual improvement side of things, with those lens flares, if you go over to GitHub, you'll actually get a full explanation as to how this works. And I love that developers here actually leave those breadcrumbs for us to read about exactly what they did under the hood to make it work, because it could just be a commit with no notes, so you would realize something changed, but you didn't have any idea why. But I love that developers actually kind of educate you along the way to explain exactly what's going on with all of the different triangles, maybe even squares, and where they are in the frame buffer, and how those all basically compute to make lens flares look correctly when you're playing a game. Because again, you want the game to look as pretty as possible. So there's a brand new version of PPSSPP out as of yesterday, 1.19, and I definitely recommend upgrading to it. You're going to get better visuals, better audio performance, some low-level emulation, and a ton of other features that I linked down below. But we're done. I'll see you next time, and go play some Outrun 2 this weekend if you didn't get a Switch 2. Leave me a comment if you did though. See you guys next time. Bye bye.